Hey guys, Will here. So I thought today I'd take you on a bit of a behind the scenes tour of the Boosted Media Studio. We'll start off with the sim that's behind me. I've just been making a whole bunch of modifications to that over the last couple of days. That's the reason why I haven't had a video in a few days. I've been flat out drilling holes and doing all kinds of bits and pieces, but it's all set up and pretty much finished now. I know that a sim rig is never finished, but that's about as close as this is going to be for a little while, I think. We'll take you through the streaming setup, the editing setup as well, and just take you generally around the room to show you how everything is sort of pieced together. Now, there are a couple of things that we still need to finish off with the room, acoustically in particular. I know a lot of you that watch the videos have been complaining about the audio quality, and that's something that I'm going to be fixing up hopefully in the next couple of weeks. I've got some big bass traps coming, but I want to show you sort of where we are and where we're sort of planning on going over the next couple of months. So let's start off by running you through the entire sim rig here. So let's start off with the monitors. We'll start from the top and work our way down to the bottom. So up the top here, we have a old Sony Bravia 32-inch TV that I've had sitting around in my garage for probably about 10 years now. It's the first time it's really been used for a very long time. And I figured I may as well use that. All it's really responsible for is just giving me my overlay here, or my heads-up display rather, for what I'm recording or streaming. So I'll run you through that setup just a little bit later on once we've gone through all the other hardware. But basically what you're seeing here is what I'm actually recording. So you can see my pedal cam up there, as well as my face to cam, and then the recording from the sim itself. But we'll cover that in more detail in just a moment. We've got our Rode Broadcaster microphone. Now this is something that I've been using on and off for a while now, but I just actually hooked it up to a proper boom today. Now this is just a $20 boom that I picked up on eBay a little while ago as a sort of proof of concept, but I just ordered today a really nice boom, which we're going to be using to replace this one. So this one's a little bit kind of dodgy in how it moves and how it sort of sits in position. The new one's going to be a lot better than that one. And I kind of rigged up this extra piece of profile up the top here off the back of my monitor stand just to sort of mount things along the top here. So there we got a Razer Kaio webcam as well. Now that is something else that I'm probably going to be upgrading pretty soon as well. I'm looking at moving to a mirrorless camera, maybe something like a Sony RX100 or something similar to that to use as my webcam, simply because I haven't been really happy with the quality of the Razer Kaio. Now, not to speak badly of that camera in particular, because webcams in general don't tend to have the best picture quality with their relatively small sensors. But yeah, I just haven't been super thrilled with it. There's been a couple of other dramas as well. If we look around the back here as well, and excuse all the cable spaghetti, but I've got another one here which is pointing down towards my pedals, which is obviously what's making up the pedal cam here. Now, I had all sorts of dramas running two cameras of the same type. I had to end up sort of hacking the drivers and renaming files and all sorts of bits and pieces to get these working at all. So yeah, I don't know whether I would recommend Razer Kaios. I was kind of drawn to the idea from the little ring light that's sitting there, but it doesn't really make a whole lot of difference, at least in my context. So yeah, a little bit sort of funny on that one, but we won't spend too much time talking about the webcams. Up the top here, you can see I've got my studio light here. Again, this is just a cheap light that I got for about 40 bucks off eBay, and I've actually got another one over here as well, which I'll show you in just a moment with all the rest of the setup. But yeah, that was just a cheap one. It doesn't have adjustable color temperature or anything like that, but I have actually just ordered today as well a Elgato key light, which I'm going to mount up here as well, and that's going to give me full color temperature adjustability and the ability to adjust brightness and everything from you can actually do it from a Stream Deck, which is this guy down here, which I'll show you in a moment, as well as from a tablet app or a phone or whatever you want. So that should really sort of add an extra level of dynamicness to the videos, you could say. Now behind here as well, we've got all of our acoustic tiles. Now a lot of people incorrectly call this soundproofing. It's not soundproofing. What it is sound deadening. So it removes a bit of the echo. Now you can still hear there is quite a lot of echo in this room, and that's, as I mentioned before, that's something that we are going to be treating pretty soon. I've got some bass traps which I'm going to be putting in the corners over here. You can hear if I walk over here, it's a lot more echoey already, as you can tell, than what it is when we go back over towards the Sims. So it's definitely making a difference in here, but yeah, we do need to add a little bit of extra as well. Now, I went with black as well because I want to start doing some videos where I have the camera sort of mounted above the seat here, so you kind of get the driving view and kind of a bit more of an immersive experience. It's something that I'm going to be experimenting with into the future with the channel a little bit, maybe even doing some sort of helmet cam views as well with a GoPro. So yeah, you can look out for that as well. And I wanted to have sort of like a nice black backdrop to this. I dim the lights as well when we're doing that. Now on the subject of lights, actually, I should just mention as well, the downlights that you see in the room are all completely color temperature adjustable as well as RGB, and they're all controlled through my Google Home Mini, which is sitting over on my desk over here. So if I say, okay, set the lights to blue. So obviously with the studio light still running, we've got a lot of white light in here, but if we swing around to the other side, You can see now all these other lights have turned blue, and even the strip that we've got behind our desk here has gone blue as well. And as I mentioned before, this is fully color adjustable. So any color we want, we can even have it cycle through different colors based off temperature and all sorts of crazy things like that. So, okay, set the lights to daylight. And back to how we were before. So that is the lighting, and that's really useful for all sorts of my rolling shots and things like that I do for my review videos. But let's move on with the sim equipment now. So down to the monitors. So these are BenQ EX3501R monitors, so 100 Hertz, and they're 3840 by 1440 resolution. So total resolution across the entire span of 10320 by 1440. So these are, to be honest with you, are probably a little bit bigger than I would have gone if I had my time again. I think the sweet spot for sim monitors is about 32 inch, so out to about here, but that adds a little bit of extra height. What I find is when I'm sitting in the driving position, which is about here, this is pretty much what I'm seeing. So I turn my head to look around. And what I would like is to have a little bit more height in the screens. I think that would be a little bit more useful than the width. If you sort of look from above here, above my head and where I'd be sitting, the seat's kind of wound back a little bit at the moment to help me get in and out. But I've got sort of a 180 degree field of view right around the sim, and that's really a little bit more than I need. I think usually when I'm looking to the side, I'm not looking beyond about here, and then we've got all of this extra here, which is kind of redundant. And obviously, the more width you're adding, that's more pixels that you're having to draw and more stress on the graphics card as well. And it's a little bit redundant. So yeah, I think if I was to recommend screens, I'd say go with a 32-inch screen. I actually have a 32-inch screen over here, which is 144 Hertz, which is what I use for my streaming machine, but I'll show you that in just a moment. But yeah, 32-inch I think is the sweet spot for triples. Now, you might be wondering about VR. Tucked away behind here, I do have my HP Reverb headset. You can see I've got a little microfiber cloth in there as well that I use to clean the lenses. I find that my eyebrows tend to oil them up a little bit. So I do use VR as well, and you would have seen that in some of my videos. That's just sort of sitting there. And then moving down to the wheel. So at the moment, we've got our Cube Controls wheel installed on a SimuCube 2 Ultimate. Now, I do also have a couple of other wheels. I've got my Asher Racing F28 SC, as well as my Porsche 911 Fanatic wheel. Now, I do also have a DD2 wheelbase as well, and I do use that quite routinely as well. I generally, when I'm doing my videos, I have the SC2 Ultimate mounted, but I hold on to the DD2 for other reasons, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on in the video as well. But at the moment, we've got our Cube Controls wheel on there, wireless wheel connected to the wheelbase via Bluetooth, and this Asher Racing wheel is Bluetooth as well, so it's all completely wireless. It just hooks up a little antenna there that you can see, and it's all nice and easy to use. So that's the wheel, and you can see next to that we've got the Elgato Stream Deck. Now at the moment that is actually hooked up to my streaming PC, so all of the various buttons here you can see change between different scenes. So at the moment we're in the gaming scene, you can see that showing that. And then if we switch scenes to say intermission, for example, you can see it changes across, and now we have our face-to-cam camera, which is obviously the feed coming from the web camera there. And then we've got a bunch of different scenes. So we've got Be Right Back, we've got our ending scene for our ending credits, our starting scene, you know, all the various different scenes that we have. Now, what I want to do here is just run you through a bit of the technical side of how this is all set up, because this is quite tricky in how I've done this. So if we change back to our game scene again, you can see we've got the game feed, which is sort of the center monitor, but it's not exactly that simple. And then we've got the feed from our webcam that's pointing to our pedals as well as our front facing. So what I'm doing here is I'm using a technology called NDI, which is a network transport protocol for sending video across a network. So what we're doing is we're using OBS Studio on the Sim PC, capturing the entire 3-screen span and cropping it down to just the area that we want. And then we're sending that over the network to our streaming PC, and then that is what you're seeing here capturing the video. So this is what's feeding the signal then back to my overlay monitor there. So that is basically just a preview of what we're seeing here. So this monitor is hooked up to my streaming PC. And then we also have a separate hookup for this monitor as well to my Sim PC, which we'll look at the details of in just a moment as well. And that is what I'm able to use for other overlays. So say if I want to have my telemetry data or something like that up on the screen, I can do that as well. And I can just switch between the various different HDMI inputs. So you can see there on the back, got a couple of different connections going into the back there. Simple as that. So this works really well because it removes the need to have a capture card. So that saves a little bit of money there. But also it allows us to select any area of the screens that we want, including triples. So with a capture card, you wouldn't be able to capture all 3 monitors. You can only choose one output because obviously we're using 3 DisplayPort connections here. As you can see on the back of the PC there, to connect to our 3 displays. So what we can do here is we can actually use a slightly wider area of the screen. Now at the moment, because I'm running at a 16:9 aspect ratio, I'm actually cropped down a little bit. But if I shrink that down on the screen, I can actually bring it in so I get all of the mirrors and everything like that as well. And you would have seen in some of my recordings of some of my racing streams, we actually do that. We shrink it down and actually get a wider perspective on the entire thing so that we can see what's going on. So that's how I do that. Saves the money on buying a capture card and adds a little bit of extra versatility as well. So in terms of streaming, what we have over here is a separate machine. This is the little box down here, and this is the machine that you saw me rebuild a couple of weeks ago on the channel. So it's a 8086K processor, 2080, no, it's not, it's a 1080 Ti graphics card, and then 32 gigs of RAM and a 2 terabyte Samsung Pro SSD. So it's a pretty high-end machine. It was pretty much the best you could buy a couple of years ago when I built it, and that was the machine that I used for all of my gaming and pretty much everything up until I built the Sim PC about 6 months ago now. Now, the entire build of that machine, as well as the Sim PC, is all covered on the channel. So if you want to see more details on any of that in great detail, actually, I did the entire build as a separate video series covering each individual aspect, everything down to bending the tubes and everything. So if you're interested in that, check those videos out. But this machine here is a 2080 Ti, a 9900K, 32 gigs of RAM again, and a Samsung 1 terabyte SSD Pro drive. So pretty much the bee's knees as far as a sim racing PC is concerned at the moment. You could go to a Titan RTX or maybe a SLI setup with multiple graphics cards, but the performance doesn't really scale well when you do that, and it tends to be a bit of a waste of money. So this is where I sort of set the limit for this machine. Now that is sitting on an old table that I actually got from my mum when she moved house recently. I'm going to replace that with a white table that fits the decor of the rest of the room a little bit better soon. So that is the sim racing PC, and again, there's more details on that and all the various components and the build of it on the channel if you want to check that out. So moving over to this side now, we've got our button box, which we did a DIY on the channel. That is based off AM Studios DIY build. And then we've also got some digital gauges here, or analog gauges, which are based off a digital signal as well. So that's coming from an Arduino. So we've got a boost gauge, we've got a water temperature gauge, and those are sort of just for fun, really. And then we've got our tachometer down here, which is a little bit more useful, and a shift light as well. And that's all running through SimHub software, along with my WinSim as well. And again, we did a DIY video on the WinSim. Actually got a cable tie there that I need to chop off, I just noticed. And again, there's a detailed video on the channel showing how I did all this. So we've got one fan on this side and another one on this side as well. Now you can actually set up directional fan control as well. So when you're turning to the left, you get more wind from this side, or to the right, more wind from this side. Now I was actually really surprised at just how much extra immersion the WinSim adds. I kind of, to be honest with you, thought it was going to be a bit of a gimmick, but it actually turned out to be one of the favorite things that I actually did with my sim rig. So definitely recommend checking out the DIY guide on that one. So we've got the WinSim, the button box, and the gauges all running off 3 separate Arduino boards, and that's all controlled through SimHub. That's all running down to a little USB hub that's sitting down here. So we've got the pedals, the Arduinos, the keyboard, and the mouse, as well as the shifter, all hooked up through the hub there. And then the wheelbase itself is connected directly to the PC so that we don't get any loss in connection there. Obviously the data rate is quite high with the SimiCube 2 Ultimate, so we don't want to have any dropouts or loss of data there. Now, moving across now to the shifters, we've got the Fanatic Club Sport shifter, and then the handbrake as well. And this is a really handy shifter because it has an H pattern mode as well as a sequential. So there's just a little slider on the side here. You flick it up like that, and it becomes sequential. And then you flick it back again and it turns into an H pattern. So pretty handy there. I mean, there are much higher end modules available that cost a lot more money, but this has served me really well, and you know, it does everything I need it to do, so I didn't really see any need to upgrade it. Then we've got our SimiCube 2 Ultimate control box here. This is our emergency cutoff switch as well as our standby switch. We've got a control module for our butt kicker as well, which I'll show you in a moment. We've got our mouse sitting over on this side. Now, obviously, being in Australia, we drive with the shifter on the left-hand side. Makes it a little bit awkward to use a mouse with the left hand because we kind of have to have the mouse pad on this side. There's nowhere really to mount it on this side that's high enough. So a little bit of an oversight there, but I'm getting used to it. And then we've got a little laptop down here as well, which I use exclusively for streaming. So this is something that HP sent me to review. I haven't actually done the review yet. I've sort of been getting used to it and driving it for a little while. So this is actually a pretty high-end laptop. It's a 2080 Ti Max-Q graphics card, a i9 processor, and I think 32 gig of RAM. and 512 SSD. So way overkill for what I'm using it for at the moment. But I'm actually thinking once I've reviewed this, I might end up giving it to my brother to use as his main sim racing machine, but we'll see about that a little bit later on. So continuing on, moving down now, you can see we've got our RCC seat here, which is custom embroidered with the Boosted Media logo. We've got our Sparco seat belts, which I just added today, and that's actually hooked up to our Ghetto belt tensioner system that I showed you guys ages ago. So I've adapted it to fit with the P1X cockpit. So what I did was I created these little mounting points here, and I kind of ummed and ahed over exactly how to do this for a while, but ended up sort of landing on this. It seems to work quite well. So what happens here is we've got a Next Level Racing Motion Platform V3, which is basically just a seat mover. And what happens is when you brake, the seat tilts forward, and that tightens up on either side here. So if you're sort of braking and moving to the left, the seat would go, you know, one direction, and that sort of tightens the belt over your shoulder. Now, it sounds a little bit weird, but it actually does make a big difference. And I did a video showing exactly how that kind of works about a year ago now, and I've been using it ever since, but it really adds that extra level of immersion. It kind of gives the sensation of G-forces when you're braking, which is really cool, as well as when you crash. So that's what all of this kind of jerry-rigging is going on here. That's the butt kicker 2 there. It's mounted to a post directly underneath the seat, so you get the vibration through the seat. And really, I kind of keep that dialed down. Mostly what it's doing is just sort of giving the clunk of gear changes and stuff. But that combined with the Motion Platform V3 gives a really nice overall effect. Now, I'm going to do another video talking about the Motion Platform in a little bit more detail soon, simply because I think it's one of those things that's a little bit misunderstood. People tend to think, oh, it only moves the seat. You need to have something that moves the entire rig. And obviously, there is a place for that. But the seat mover itself kind of adds an extra dimension. So I'm going to talk about that in more detail in another video. Now, you might be wondering, what about full motion? Now, that is something that I did actually have planned for this month, but unfortunately with the current situation in the world and stock shortages and everything, we've had to delay the review that I was going to be doing on that for a few months, probably at least. So that is kind of the way it is at the moment. So moving back up to the front of the rig again, we've got our HE Ultimate pedals, which I bought secondhand off a lovely Facebook group member not too long ago. So we've done a couple of reviews and videos around those as well. And you can see I've recently just added, in fact, this is the first time you guys have seen this, added a rail here as well. So it's actually sitting on seat rails, which means I can adjust the position of the pedals if other people are wanting to drive. So all I need to do is just pull up on this, and the whole thing just moves, and it doesn't have any flex in it whatsoever. It sits absolutely stable, which is really cool. So move that back again and just click it into the position that I want. And I've also got one of those on the seat as well, so I can move the seat forward and back. So that makes a big difference. Obviously with an 80/20 rig like this, it can be quite difficult to adjust for different people. So this really sort of adds a lot of versatility there. It means if my wife Jill wants to drive this rig, she can jump in and out of it and move it to her position in a couple of seconds without any drama, which is a really nice thing to have. So just little details like that make all the difference. So we've got our Sparco seatbelts here, which we kind of talked about before. It's a 4-point harness, simply because the seat doesn't have a cutout in the bottom for a 5-point. And I mean, look, obviously we have the belt tensioner system that I showed you before, but what I find is using a seatbelt, and this is something that I get criticized for quite a bit, but I genuinely find that when I use it, it does change how I drive, because when your shoulders are restricted by a seatbelt, you tend to drive with your arms and use a more correct posture. Whereas when you don't have a seatbelt, you tend to move your shoulders around a little bit more. So I do actually find that makes a genuine difference. And I know a lot of people are probably going to think that I'm a bit of a wanker for saying that, but it does genuinely make a difference, at least I find. So that is pretty much it for the sim rig. We've got our custom boosted media gloves from Abruzzi here, as well as my old Alpine Star gloves underneath. And I've been sort of changing between those a little bit recently, because I'm going to be doing a follow-up video on the Abruzzi gear pretty soon. But that is pretty much it for the sim. So let's move across now to some of the other gear involved in streaming. So I've got my little control module here, which is just a cheap audio interface, or a DAC as you might call it, for my microphone. So that's connected to the Rode Broadcaster and comes across and feeds into OBS. So we've just got some basic adjustments here for our tone, pretty much set flat at the moment. I've got a nice clean signal coming in, so I can adjust it in post if I need to. That's pretty much all that that's responsible for. We've got our wireless mic transmitter here, or receiver rather, which is what we use for recording. And then I'll show you the microphone for that in just a moment as well. That's what we use for recording some of our other videos. And that's something that's definitely going to be seeing an upgrade soon. We've got a EX3203R monitor from BenQ here. And that's probably the monitor that I would have gone for if I had my time again, for all three of the monitors on here instead of the 35 inches. That's a 144 hertz panel, and that's what I use for most of my gaming as well. So anything that I'm not doing in the sim, I come across to this monitor for. So I've got my old G19 keyboard here, which I love. This has got the, it's not running at the moment, but the ADIA Extreme overlay here. So it's filthy at the moment. I need to give it a clean, but that gives me all my various stats. I love this keyboard. I can't part with it despite it being so old. Got my baby monitor there as well. And then obviously the streaming PC underneath that I showed you just before. We've got a set of old Sony studio headphones here. I use those simply because they've got a really nice flat frequency response. So when I'm editing, it gives me a good idea of a nice flat signal. Got a couple of little adapters here that I'm going to be mounting up on top of this rail to mount the DSLR or the mirrorless camera once we get around to that as well. So that is pretty much the streaming PC, and I'm probably going to be retiring that pretty soon. We'll either use the laptop for everything. I'm thinking of actually trying this out, doing all my recording and streaming on this so it's right next to me and I can sort of stop and start more easily. Obviously, we do have the Stream Deck that we can use, but yeah, I think it'd be a little bit more convenient to try and do everything from the laptop. So that's something that I'm going to be experimenting with a little bit over the next couple of weeks. And then moving over to my sort of daily workhorse machine. So this is where I do all of my video editing as of about 2 months ago, as well as any other office style work that I might be working on. So this is a MacBook Pro 16-inch. So I bought this a couple of months ago, pretty much a top spec model. So it's a 9980 HK processor, 32 gigs of RAM and 2 terabytes SSD storage. We've got a Sony Takumi audio system here as well, and underneath here on a very, very old nested table is the amplifier for that. It's just going into standby mode there, I can see. And then I've got the wireless trackpad as well as the keyboard. So I use that basically just for editing. So it's a really good control surface. You can sort of scroll from side to side really easily using that, and it's really improved my workflow. It sounds kind of trivial, but it probably saves me at least an hour a day just in editing time using that. So definitely something that I'm finding very, very useful. I've got my little finger exerciser here as well, which I use to keep my hands nice and strong for playing guitar. And I'll show you the guitars in just a moment as well. Now, the monitor that we're using here is I can't remember the model name now, but it's a Dell 38-inch curved monitor, and it's a beautiful monitor. It's got really nice color reproduction. Unfortunately, it's only 60 hertz though, so it's not really any good for gaming. But yeah, I use this for all of my editing and pretty much anything that I'm doing on this machine. Very rarely actually take the laptop off. Now, you might be wondering, why am I using a laptop for editing, particularly when I've got such a high-end machine down here? To be honest with you, I'm finding that the Mac just works so much more efficiently for editing, particularly with Premiere Pro. The render times on the Mac, even though it's a laptop, are about twice as fast as what they are with the 1080 Ti down here in the 8086K processor. So that is actually working really well for me at the moment. And it also has the added advantage of, if I'm doing something else or I need to go and look after the kids for 5 minutes while my wife's doing something else, I can continue working on this, just take it with me and then continue my work wherever I am. Now, I originally kind of bought it because I was expecting to be out on the road quite a bit editing video, but with all the lockdown and everything that's going on at the moment, that kind of hasn't eventuated. And then we have the Logitech G90, what model is it, 903? Yeah, 903, as well as the wireless trackpad. It's a bit grubby as well. I need to give it a good clean. But this is a wireless mouse mat, so the mouse is always charged, and yeah, never have to worry about the battery going flat. So that's that. Got my sunnies there on rare occasions that I go outside, as well as my glasses that I don't think you guys have ever seen me wear. Then we've got a wireless charging mat for my phone, as well as the Google Home box, which is what I use to control all the lighting, as you saw before. So that's sort of my daily driver office setup, my streaming setup, then the sim over here, and then the rest of the room, we've got our 3D printer over here, which is the one that we've been using to print a bunch of stuff lately. Just printed a couple of cable clips for the rig a couple of days ago, so that's what's sitting there at the moment. Various different guitars that I've acquired over the years. So that's the bass guitar that I bought with grand aspirations of playing a lot, and I think I've probably spent less than an hour playing it the entire time that I've had it. My first, actually no, it wasn't my first electric guitar, it was my second electric guitar. My parents bought that for me in 1997, and that was what got me all through school and all my school performances and various different bands and stuff. Then my 2012 Strat Plus, no, what is it? Strat Deluxe. So that's another one that I've bought it in 2012 new, and that's sort of my main electric guitar. And then we've got my acoustic guitar, which is a Maton EA80C. So that's an Australian brand. A lot of you guys overseas might not have heard of that, but the Aussies should know what that is. Then we've got the other studio light here, which is what I use to sort of just light the set when I'm running things here. And this gizmo here is a teleprompter. So if you come over here, this is just an iPad that's sitting on the top there. So I put my scripts up on that, and then they sort of project onto the mirrorized front panel here. And then behind that is sitting my Sony A7. So I'm actually looking at upgrading this to a 4K body pretty soon as well, but it's running a 24 to 70 millimeter f2.4 lens. And then a preamp sitting on top as well for the microphone. And that's something else that I am going to be upgrading soon as well. The whole microphone setup at the moment just isn't really working great, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed. Part of it is down to the acoustics in the room as well as the microphone that I was using. And I'll quickly grab that for you as well. So we were using a Shure, what is it, an SVX1, which is a lapel mic as well as the radio pack. But yeah, look, I've been a little bit disappointed with the performance of that. So that's going to be getting upgraded pretty soon as well. And then over here, this is all my storage for various different bits and pieces. We've got so a lot of people ask about this actually. This is the original supercharger off my BRZ, my Subaru BRZ, which was what we kind of started the channel with originally. And this actually seized up on me. So that was replaced with another one, but I've kind of held on to it as a bit of a memento from the car, which has been, I sold that car for 3 or 4 years ago now, so it doesn't seem like that long, but it was. So that's that. Then we've got my V3 pedals, and this is sort of just whatever I have on display whenever I'm shooting. So I've got the Logitech G920 on there at the moment, the Formula V2. And then this desktop PC, which is another contender for potentially replacing the streaming PC as well. So if the laptop doesn't work out, I'll probably end up using this one. It's a 9700K processor and a 2080 Ti. So yeah, whichever one I don't end up using, I'm gonna give to my brother to borrow for a while so he can start getting involved in some of the sim racing videos as well. So that's gonna be really cool. And yeah, that's pretty much it. We've got the Fanatic DD2 here as well. Now, another question that you guys ask me a lot is what I do with the old gear that I'm not using anymore. So sometimes I am able to sell it. I've sold a couple of rigs over the last couple of months. But generally speaking, when it comes to Fanatic gear and stuff like that, I don't like to sell it. First of all, anything that Fanatics send me to review, I'm not actually allowed to sell. Part of the contract that we have when we sign up for them sending us gear to review is that if they're sending it to us to keep, we're not allowed to financially benefit from it, so we're not allowed to sell it. But most of the time anyway, I like to hold on to things so that, for example, with the DD2, when they release a new wheel, it means I still have the wheelbase and I can test it out. So that's the reason why I hold on to that stuff. So all the people that keep messaging me, asking me when I'm going to be selling stuff, please don't, because it's not likely that I will. And if I do sell anything, I'll always let you guys know on the Discord community. So always make sure you check out that if you're interested in buying any of the secondhand gear. Yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. So if there's anything else that you'd like to know or anything that you think I might have skipped over, let me know in the comments below. As I said before, there's a whole bunch of videos. Pretty much every single thing that I've kind of skimmed over in today's video is covered in more detail in those videos in the description. So check that out. But yeah, guys, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.